Coming up, the top 10 mixing tips and tricks to improve your final mixdown. Hey guys, welcome to my studio. I had this morning an important business meeting. That's also why I'm dressed like this. The meeting was all about the advertisement thing I told you. They asked me to make music for them, and it's one of the biggest companies here in Germany, so I sat down today with 10 people in one room. None of them has a clue about music. They don't even know what a chord is, and these people try to explain me what they want in their words, and I honestly didn't understand a single thing. I would just do something and send it to them. In the past couple of days I've showed you how I've worked on my Not Scared track, how I've made it, and today it's actually time to finally mix it down. A lot of you have been asking me to do a video about mixing, so this is happening today. It won't really help you to show you what I'm doing now to my mix, because if I boost the kick at 50 Hz by 1 dB, this might be good for my track, but it will very probably not be good for your track. Mixing really depends on the samples, on the amount of elements, the kinds of elements, the musical style you're doing, the style you're going for, the preference you have. A track that might sound very dull to me might be exactly what someone else wanted to achieve with this mix. So it's a very personal thing, so I will keep it probably to 10 tips and tricks how to improve your final mixdown. I think this makes more sense. And people on YouTube love to click on everything that just says top 10. You probably also, because you just clicked on it. First of all, when you start mixing, make sure that you're mixing with fresh ears. It doesn't make sense after an entire day trying to come up with a new track to then start mixing it. Your ears will be tired. You won't be able to make the right decisions. So today is actually perfect. I didn't listen to any music yet. I can just start fresh. And also related to this is to mix at a volume that is not too loud, because if you mix at a volume that is just way too loud, your ears get tired very fast, and also you will hear things differently. Our ears tend to hear the high frequencies a lot more when you boost the volume, so keep it at around 70-80 dB. I think this is like the studio standard for mixing. I've just measured it. It was always right around 80 dB. That's really what I feel comfortable with mixing. By the way, this is a nice app called Noise. You can just measure the dB anywhere, and I always use it in the club before I DJ just to check how loud it actually is on the dance floor. The second one is to only start with your mixing when you're actually satisfied with everything that is going on in the track. If you're still not sure about some elements, about some sounds, about the arrangement, about the automation, don't even start mixing. It will just set you back. You will have to go back to finding sounds, then mix again. This will be a big mess and you will waste a lot of time. Try really to separate the creative part from the technical mixing part. My next step is then to go through the entire project, track by track, EQ all of the tracks individually, but also in context. So for example, getting rid of resonances and the hi-hats, I will do this on the channel when it is soloed. But to really get the level right of the hat, and also checking, for example, the low end on a bass or on a guitar, I will listen to it with the entire mix on and adjust it. I always start with the most important element. This could be the vocals, or in electronic music it really makes sense to just start with the kick. Just as an example to show you how important it is to really mix the things in context, here this main synthesizer. Listening to it alone, it will totally make sense to just boost the low end and to make it really fat. But of course, when you add the bass, and I have in this case even 2 basses, it will sound really muddy. And also here with the basses, there is one playing the really low frequencies. I've layered on top of it another synthesizer that has a lot of higher frequency information, so I cut it away the low end just to make sure the two are not colliding. At the same time, I've already taken care of the next step, that is stereo imaging. I have spreaded some of the drum elements, also the main synthi sound, just to separate a bit better from the vocals. I've actually made an entire video about this topic already, so if you're interested in that, I will link it up at the end of this one. Next up was cleaning all of the reverb and delays. It is really important also to listen to them alone to really hear what they're actually sounding. And then also listen to them in context and checking the decay times, because at the end it's just important what it will sound like when everything is playing at the same time, and the length of a reverb or a delay can sound very different if you listen to it alone compared to listening to it in the entire mix. I always have my reverbs on a bus. Here in this one I've used the Valhalla Vintage Verb. Here you can just change the decay time. I also always have an EQ right after it that I can just turn on and EQ the reverb separately, as well a compressor to add sidechaining if it's necessary. Another really good tip for mixing is just to have a low cut on almost all of your elements except for the kick and the sub bass, of course. You can see it here in the small EQ previews. It's really almost on every track. For example, in this track, one of the main synthi top melodies that actually just has information above 600 Hz has some weird low end noise going on here, so just cutting it away, it is really not needed for the sound. Of course, there are also some exceptions. If you record just a guitar and a voice for an acoustic track, it doesn't really make sense to cut away the low end of the guitar. You will need it. There is nothing else playing at the same time, so just leave it. Same goes for the breaks. In electronic music, if you don't have a kick and bass playing, you can just leave the low end on the lowest element that is going on in the break to make it sound more natural and not too thin. My next tip would be not to overdo it with compression. A lot of people don't really know how it works. They just put it on everything in the hopes that it will make the sound fatter, but actually it really doesn't. Most compressing even removes low end information, and especially with electronic music it's not really that necessary. Most of the samples you will use are already compressed 100 times because someone sampled it from an already compressed and even mastered track. And also the software synthes don't need compression. I think the only thing you really will need compression is on vocals you've recorded yourself. I also always bounce down a version of the track before I've mixed it and after I've mixed it to be able to A and B compare it. I also compare it to other release tracks of mine, also to other producers' track, just to really have something to reference to. It also makes sense to save an alternative every time you start with the mixing process, so just in case you messed up you can go back. You can also of course test it on headphones, maybe on your phone in mono, on smaller headphones, at home, in your car, wherever you want, but this is already getting into the task that is actually for the mastering engineer to make sure your track is working on all of the systems. But this information might also be helpful for you to maybe even further improve your mix. You will only get better with the mixing if you do it a lot. It's with everything in life, you just have to practice, build up your experience, and then it will be way easier to mix down tracks. The first time you're mixing, you just have the experience from this one track, and the next time you might encounter a different bass, a different key, different samples, a different kick, and just by the time you will learn how to deal with the situations that come up and solve these problems to have a really nice and balanced mix. So if your mix is not perfect yet, don't worry, just make the next track and learn more, and by the time it will just get better eventually. My last tip is probably by far the most important one. To be able to get a nice and clean mix down, you actually need to be able to hear what you're doing. So you need to sit in a room that is acoustically treated. You need speakers that are made for a studio purpose. Otherwise you're just playing a guessing game. There is no way you can get a low and nice tight low end if you're sitting in a room with standing waves where you just hear 10 dB more at 50 Hertz. It's just impossible. So before you're spending all of your money on fancy outboard gear, on expensive plugins or some controllers, make sure you fix the problems in your room to be able to hear what you're actually doing. It's just so important. I can't emphasize it enough.
Feelers in love and feeling free. Let's go back to the days full of ecstasy. Let's go back to the place with no gravity. Let's get
I didn't really have a lot of time today here in the studio. I still managed to finish the track. It's now bouncing out. This almost pointless meeting this morning just took away way too much of my entire day. You know, I actually got one more tip. If your track doesn't really sound good, before you start mixing, don't even start mixing it. Go back to selecting the right samples. Go back to trying to find the right sounds. And also having a good arrangement will help you to mix the track. I mean by that you just don't have all of the elements play at the same time. It's really important to figure out when to play what and how much of it, just to have it easier mixing. I'm now heading to the city center to pick up Vanessa. We're tonight invited to a private birthday party. They asked me 3 times not to bring the camera with me. I don't know why. Some people are just scared of this thing. So we'll probably just end the video right here. And yes, I know this hat absolutely doesn't go with the outfit and looks a bit stupid, but it's freezing outside.